Sup and welcome back to Interpreting the Scares. Today we're bringing it back around to the Scream universe of films, the third film in the series. Originally planned to be the last, it's Scream 3. The further we get away from the first film, the more I seem to forget the overall plot. I knew that this third movie would ultimately make fun of horror trilogy tropes, but past that I couldn't quite remember what happened, who the killer was this time around, or why he or she was doing what he or she was doing. So you kind of have to ask yourself if this third film is really a desideratum or not. Let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, desideratum. Something that is needed or wanted. Another Ghostface killer is after Sidney once again in Scream 3 during the height of the anticipated release of the mirroring film within a film this time around, Stab 3, which is described as the final closing chapter in a horror trilogy. Given Sidney's history with maniacs obsessed with movie tropes, you can bet that this killer is obsessed with horror trilogy tropes. Which means, as you might expect, that all bets are off. To be completely honest with you, things are starting to get a little bit old in this series, and what you come to expect at this point, you get. Simple as that. And one thing that I mentioned with the previous films is that each movie had a level of comedy and horror. The first leaned a little bit more into the horror aspect, the sequel leaned a bit more into the comedy side of things, and this one, I'd say it leaned once more into the horror aspect of the two. So much, in fact, that comedy doesn't seem to be anywhere to be found. I mean, yeah, Jamie Kennedy reprises his role for a short cameo in order to explain the relevancy of trilogy tropes and what they're experiencing in this movie, but it's such a short scene, and it doesn't seem to be very important, and you almost forget everything that he said immediately after he said it, because all it was exposition. Yeah, his role was almost always exposition in the other films, but it was also comedic relief. In the previous films, he was in the entire movie from beginning to end, maybe in the background, but he was there, and he kind of helped level out the balancing themes between horror and comedy. So without that unique personality from Jamie Kennedy, and without any real character replacing him, the film went immediately to horror above everything else. So I mean, just looking at horror alone, you have to ask yourself if the kills are interesting, if the killer's plan is smart. Basically, what makes this movie unique? How will you pick apart Scream 3 from the others? Unfortunately, the answer to these questions aren't good enough. The killer's plan makes probably the most sense out of all three films, which unfortunately made them seem too sane. You watch these movies back to back, you'll notice that the killers seem to be gaining more and more sanity. The first killer was just, pure insanity for insanity's sake. The second was fueled by hatred and revenge, but it made a little bit more sense. And this one just made the most logical sense, which unfortunately made the killer, like I said, feel normal. And if they're normal, then why are they acting just as insane as the first killer? As for the kills themselves, are they interesting? Not really. Out of the three films, this one has to have the least amount of serious kills. By serious kills, I mean people in the main cast that die. Instead, the people that are getting picked off are the actors on the movie set. People that you don't care about. Needless to say, certain things bugged me about Scream 3. It's not the best film in the series, not by a long shot, but there were a few things that did stand out to me as good, primarily production design. The one thing that I remember about this movie above all else is the movie set. When pretty much anybody in the primary cast sets foot on the soundstage, they all kind of get blown away by deja vu because the movie set looks exactly like the first movie, and it probably is the same set as the first film now that I think about it, which I suppose kind of leans a little bit more into the comedy. In general, it's still a decent, albeit basic, slasher horror film. Let's go ahead and talk about the final score for a second. From an unbiased, technical vantage point, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the movie other than maybe it's not super original. Everything else works like you'd either expect it to or want it to. So that just screams decent, but nothing more, 72%. My bias score also feels exactly the same way, and it's not nearly a bad movie. I have a good enough time with it as its own thing, but nothing more than that. My bias score is also 72%, averaging out the two scores, we clearly come down to 72%. 72 out of 100 possible stars, making it a C- letter grade, and making it the fourth film during my Interpreting the Scares event to get a 72%. It's crazy. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on Scream 3 in the comment section down below. When it comes down to this franchise, which one do you think is the most forgettable, and why is it Scream 3? As for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, because there's always more like it coming out each and every single day. Hit the subscribe button and bell to be notified when I come out with my next Scream review, which should be Scream 4. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the #1 critic that I go to when I I need a movie pick. Thanks for joining up with us. We think you're